What's up guys, I'm back once again reacting to another video from the New Statesman. They make good content, property related content that I find interesting. This video is about gentrification of areas in the UK, so contentious topic, sensitive topic, let's get straight into it.
Britain's rental sector is in a state of crisis, but don't just take my word for it. Both Labour and the Conservatives agree that changes need to be made, and the government could bring in new reforms ahead of the next general election. But what exactly needs to be done? And is it a case of too little, too late to win back certain voters? Anna, thanks for joining us. We're on a side street here in Brixton. You moved here towards the mid-late 90s. The area's changed a lot since then. What's your reflections of that time?
This street here, which is right in the heart of Brixton, it's just off the main square. These blocks were really run down. And now I know that a lot of these properties are really expensive, private rented accommodation in excess of £2,000 a month. That sort of gives you an idea of how it's changed. You know, this was really affordable.
Interesting, because I used to do karate in Brixton when I was younger, so I know Brixton really well. There used to be a lot of markets down in Brixton. There still is, but it was a lot more cultural back then, Electric Avenue and all of them. My mum used to do her shopping in Brixton on the weekends, so very familiar with Brixton.
Housing, and you know, now it's not for the majority of Londoners. The whole area's really changed. The whole of London has gentrified massively, and an area like Brixton, which is really well located, nice houses, lots of things to do for young people, you know, bars and restaurants. It's a kind of real hot spot, and then it spreads outwards, because what you see is that people can't afford to live in Brixton, so they move a little bit further out into other parts of South London. They move to Peckham. That's now the new front line of gentrification. But then you also have parts of the city.
Peckham was another area. My gran used to live not far from Peckham. It's funny how, you know, this whole topic of gentrification is getting national attention now, where what I would call middle class English people are now being unable to afford it. Now it's getting attention. Brixton and Peckham started to get gentrified 10-15 years ago, back when the majority of the tenants there were from the Asian, Black, African and Caribbean communities, and the first wave of gentrification came and people were getting moved. They were knocking down council estates, they were knocking down undesirable places, rebuilding them with new houses, businesses, existing businesses from people that had come over in the 60s and 70s. The rates were going up and they were getting shunted off. This all started 10-15 years ago, but now that the middle class people who came in back then in the first wave of gentrification are now struggling, now it's an issue. Interesting.
Which have been completely redeveloped. Council estates have been knocked down. All of these luxury apartments have been built. So up the road in Elephant and Castle, the centre of Elephant and Castle has been completely changed. That's a different type of gentrification, I'd say. You know, a much more proactive, violent actually type of gentrification, but it's the same.
It's all violent, it's not different, it's all the same. What happened in Brixton was the same, what happened in Peckham was the same, it's all the same. It's only different when it's happening to certain people.
Sorts of processes, and it has the same impact, which means that the original communities can no longer afford to live there because property prices have just, you know, gone through the roof, and we couldn't afford to live in Brixton. I mean, we moved because even when we moved, which was now 10 years ago, you know.
There you go, that's exactly what I just said. I promise I haven't actually watched this video before, but I literally said the first wave of gentrification came 10-15 years ago. So they were the first gentrifiers, but I bet in her mind and people like her's mind, it's not an issue. But now that they can't afford to live there, now, you know, we're seeing articles on the New Statesman and other news outlets.
House prices had already gone up so much.
You wrote an article for a national newspaper that said the reconfiguration of London is akin to social cleansing. 10 years on, I mean, does it still feel as though that social cleansing is still in full force? These
processes have really accelerated over the last decade. They're going at a far greater pace than you know, that they were then. The point I was trying to make then, and will still make now, is that everything changed after the financial crash in 2008. We had all of these changes to our financial system. So one of the really big ones was quantitative easing, which is the creation of trillions of pounds and dollars of new money to bail out the banks. And actually all of this money went disproportionately into assets, disproportionately into property. And
That's true. I agree with her there.
that's a really big reason for property price inflation. And at the same time, we also had the increasing role of private equity companies come into the picture. Global private equity come and buy up lots and lots of property. And
Again, yeah, that's another great point. Private equity, these huge corporations have now started to go into property on a mass scale. They're in residential property, so they're building huge developments. They're building university accommodation. They're building retirement homes. They are absolutely capitalizing on property now.
areas like this. So these processes really accelerated. Since then, we had as much quantitative easing during COVID as we had during the whole post-financial crash period. So it's been a policy that's one of the main factors behind soaring inflation. So yeah, those processes have got way worse. And in the face of that, that juggernaut, local communities are pretty powerless, unfortunately, to do anything about it. And they can't cope with those.
And she's right. Local communities, low-income people, working-class people are almost powerless against these huge actors coming in. Now, the only way that you participate in this is to also invest. So, yeah, you might see, for example, Brixton, Peckham, the prices of property in these areas now is sky high. I couldn't afford them. Most people couldn't. But if you're thinking with an investor's cap, guys, right, the key is when these companies, these builders, these developers start going into other, say, more affordable areas of the UK, you follow them there, okay? So you might see a developer building a huge development in an area. You as an individual might not have the funds to do that, but you could buy one house, okay, nearby and benefit from the spillover of the rise in value that's being really generated by the developer. And you're being caught in that tide. You're just riding the tide up and you're benefiting from the capital appreciation from the building that's going on in these areas by these huge companies. Follow the money, follow the developers, guys. That's how you do this smart.
Rising prices, and of course people get pushed out.
It's not just really a London problem. This is seen across all cities across the
Yeah,
UK.
absolutely. Well, it's the same forces, which are affecting towns and cities across the country, disproportionately in London, because this is the financial centre. This is such a large global city where foreign investment is particularly focused on London. But other cities, Bristol, Cardiff, York, Manchester, Liverpool, Edinburgh, you just have to look at their skylines. They've got the ubiquitous luxury apartments.
And that actually links into what I just said. Those are all great places to invest. Why? Because there is a lot of regeneration and development by these big companies going on there. So, good cities to invest in. If you're struggling to find a city to invest in, start with who are the big companies that are building lots of property there, and just go somewhere near or nearabouts and around where that's going on. Can't really go wrong by using that kind of approach.
Apartments in the city centre going for such high prices. Manchester is completely transformed from what it was. Councils have been very keen to partner with really big property companies like Lendlease, who've built Elephant Park in Elephant and Castle, which was on the site of the former Haygate estate. I think for councils, they're in a situation where they have no money. Their budgets have been cut by 40%. And this partnering with a really large developer, it's the only game in town. They see it as the only way. They would call it cross-subsidy. They will allow a big developer in partnership with them to build a really large scheme. And they will say, well, a percentage of that has to be affordable housing. And that would be their justification. But actually, the definition of affordable housing was changed under the Conservative government to mean up to 80% of market rent or market value. So in a place like Elephant Park, you have 25% of affordable housing. It's not affordable to, the majority of Londoners. Here, we've got the shortest tenancies in the world. You can have a 6-month tenancy and then get kicked out. You know, there's lots of discussion around ending those no-fault evictions. That might
Most
happen,
landlords don't
but
chuck
actually
out
the
tenants
level of
after 6
precarity
months.
is going to stay really high, and tenants don't have much recourse to dealing with really poor conditions and, you know, all of the sorts of things.
That's absolutely not true. Tenants have far more power under the law when it comes to buy-to-lets, when it comes to just renting. Okay, landlords have zero power under the law. Tenants have all the power. Watch my video on having to evict my tenant for more detail around that. It's all in there.
Appetite to intervene in how the private sector operates, and Labour is also very timid about doing that. Rents have gone up so much, but that's also because landlords are passing on those costs that they're facing because of soaring interest rates.
There's a certain irony because these market forces and these government policies has dubbed a lot of people within millennials and Gen Z as Generation Rent, but these current forces are also meaning that a lot of people actually can't even get onto the rental ladder in the first place.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, there was a time, well, I've been speaking a lot about being unable, and I think the focus in general has been about people being unable to get onto the property ladder, i.e. buy a property. But in London specifically, and maybe some other areas around the southeast, we're now going into territory where you can't even get onto the rental ladder. Now, there are alternatives. You could do HMOs, so you can, you know, house share, so you pay less per month, but obviously you're sharing your space. But that's been going on for a long time. So there are ways around it and alternatives as well.
Last year, the government actually did release a white paper, a plan essentially for reforming the rental sector, which among its headlines included the removal of Section 21 notices and national decent homes standards. Yeah. What did you make of their plan?
It is a good thing that Michael Gove has said they're going to ban Section 21. It is a good thing that he's said a lot more social housing needs to be built. The Conservatives never used to mention the phrase social housing before, so there's a realisation.
I think banning Section 21 is a nonsense. I've literally had to use Section 21 in the past couple of months because my tenant didn't pay rent for the best part of 3 months. And actually left my house, my property, owing me £1,000. Now, I used Section 21, and that still didn't give me the power to actually take that money, okay? I was able to deduct some money from the deposit, but Section 21 really gave me the ability to have them move out because they weren't paying my rent, and I'm £1,000 down. So this woman's talking about removing Section 21. Where would that leave me as a landlord, right? Would I have to stay with my tenant for even longer? Have them run up even more arrears? Maybe 2,000, 3,000? Is that what she's going for? But I do agree with her in that the government needs to build more social housing. The government needs to build more housing in general, okay? That is the core issue with all of this.
Now of what needs to be done, but it's still not being done.
What needs to happen to housing in Britain?
I would say we need to have a real commitment to building a large amount of social housing, the same sort of commitment that we had in the post-war period. You know, there was a crisis.
All right, I'm going to end it there. That's a good note to end on. I absolutely agree with her. Post-war period, obviously a lot of houses were destroyed during the war, so the government went on a huge building spree. I think the issue is, does the government have the money to build hundreds of thousands of homes in the UK? I seriously doubt it. So sadly, I feel like this undersupply of housing is going to be a long-term issue. It already is a long-term issue. And I'm not sure how you fix it, okay? I'm not sure how you do that. We've tried using developers. What the developers have done is really just use schemes like Help to Buy, which should be called Help to Build. They build really expensive, premium, overpriced houses that most people still can't afford, right? So that's not the answer for the everyday person, the average person. But the original point of gentrification that we started at, yeah, I feel that gentrification, what we're really talking about is the government's inability to build affordable housing, which has really left an open door for these developers to come in and build more unaffordable, expensive housing in these areas that not only prices out middle class people on average or above average salaries, such as this woman that you can see, but especially the poorest people, the working class, okay, who are below average UK wages. They are absolutely devastated through the gentrification that comes about as a result of this. But it seems to only be you know, called into the spotlight now when it's happening to the middle class, but it wasn't 10, 15 years ago. And you know, that's what I take issue with. It all depends on who's experiencing the pain. But guys, let me know what you think in the comments below. Interesting video. I love reacting to these. Thanks as always for supporting this channel. Like it, subscribe, share it with people that you think would benefit. That's how this channel grows. And I'll see you guys on the next one.